welcome back to EDH Deck Building. I am your host, Demo, and we are talking about the Dominaria United spoilers here, the legendary creatures, which I like to touch on, and I'm going to cover hopefully the majority of them as they come out, so there's less to talk about later, because I like to touch on the commanders as much as I can. Obviously, mostly impactful in the commander format. And there's just some really interesting ones in this set that are nostalgic because they're reprints of old commanders, for those who don't know. So let's start out with Orca Siege Demon. 5 black, red demon, 5/5 with trample. Whenever another creature dies, put a +1/+1 counter on Orca Siege Demon. When Orca dies, it deals damage equal to its power divided as you choose among any number of targets. Pretty good. So this is a reiteration of Lady Orca, which is one of those horrible vanilla creatures from Legends. I believe it's also 7 mana, 5 red, black. It's like a 7/4 or something like that. So it is actually, again, I talk about those commanders like Lady Orca and all those vanilla ones where they're just unplayable because they're vanilla and they don't do anything. There's no reason to ever play them. Lady Orca is maybe the one exception because she has that 7 power. So as a commander, she can, the 7 power is the magic number where you can get to 21 damage in 3 hits. Other than that, though, it's just a vanilla commander. This is obviously a lot more interesting. So whenever another creature dies, so that's anyone's creatures, includes token creatures. I mean, this is 7 mana, so it better be pretty darn good if you're going to get something for 7 mana. Any creature dying, your opponent's creatures, your creatures, token creatures, everything dying. So you can go in any direction here. You can do literal nothing and just wait for your opponent's creatures to die, which they will. Spot removal, whatever. You can do a sacrifice theme. Rakdos does sacrifice themes really, really well. You can put your Mayhem Devils and all that stuff in there. So you can be sacrificing your token creatures, getting all the benefits off of that, and then as well putting counters on your commander. You're doing a +1/+1 counter theme, which in Rakdos isn't super fantastic, but there is some support there for the +1/+1 counter theme in Rakdos. The Ozolith, obviously, here's another deck that you're going to want to auto-include that in. Because when your commander dies, your counters obviously go on the Ozolith, and then as soon as you play your commander again, you can just move them right back on. When Orca dies, so the ability you want to build around here, I mean, you can build around the first ability a little. The second ability, when Orca dies, it deals damage equal to its power, divided as you choose among any number of targets. So obviously, that's great. It's really nice to have. So if you have this giant commander that's a 10/10, and obviously you can just attack with your commander as well. And it is power, it's equal to its power, which means the counters are obviously going to play into that, but also anything can play into that. Anything that buffs your commander's power is going to play into that as well. So again, you could just go a straight Voltron strategy with this deck. You don't have to build around the first ability at all. It can just be, I'm playing a Voltron strategy. I have a commander that already has trample, which is great for a Voltron strategy. And my opponents are going to be wanting to get my commander off the battlefield. So if my commander dies, great. I'll throw a bunch of damage around. And wouldn't you know it, that damage is dependent on my commander's power, which I plan on having really, really big. So pretty easy build around here. There's a lot of different directions you could go with it. Again, I love the divided as you choose. So now I can kill like 5 creatures. And if I have like 2 damage left over, I can just shoot my opponents in the face with it if I want. I can go all face, whatever. The one thing I'll say, if you're building this deck, make sure you have those sack outlets, right? You do not want to have a 2020 Orca sitting on the battlefield and then have your opponent swords it, right? That feels bad. You got to have that high market or that, Phyrexian Tower or that whatever, like a million different sack outlets. Again, another reason why the sacrifice theme the aristocrat style of theme might work great here is because you're going to want to have sack outlets anyway. Got to make sure you have one on the off chance that your opponent goes to swords or path your commander or cast a farewell or whatever. High market in response, so you're getting that dies trigger, right? All right, moving on. Namada Primeval Warden, and again, another reiteration of a commander. For those who don't know, there was an original Namada doing the sapperling thing. Mono green though. This one is black and green, which of course, you know, is it's going to be better. Black and green is first of all, black and green is just a fantastic color combination in general. So this one, 2 black and a green, tree folk, 3/4, has reach, of course, because it's a tree folk. If a creature an opponent controls would die, exile it instead. So that's where I have to pause, because I say all the time, if this commander was doing nothing else, that's a great ability to have in your commander, okay? Because this just gets rid of all your opponent's dice triggers, right? Just like I said with the Orca. So now if your opponent has an Orca and you got your Nemata out, this is going to screw them, right? Because if their Orca dies instead, this is a replacement effect, they're not going to get that trigger off their commander because it's not going to die. It's going to get exiled instead. You know, all those dice triggers is hoses. If you're in a graveyard theme, that Marin deck is going to get completely hosed by this. So already we're off to a great start here, because that ability on its own is fantastic in a commander game. When you do create a 1/1 green sapling creature token, fantastic. So again, we can just do the I rely on my opponent's creatures dying all the time. Don't really need to actually build around it. Or, you know, I mean, you're going to want to put spot removal in your deck anyway. How much do you want to play into that? Do you want to just sit there targeting your opponent's creatures all the time just to make sapperlings? I think you probably would a little bit. Would want a lot of spot removal, obviously, because board wipes are not going to be great. You're going to kill your commander. You're going to kill your sapperlings you're making. Let's look at the other abilities, though. Pay a green, sacrifice a sapperling, Nemata, Primeval Warden gets +2/+2 until end of turn. Okay. That's pretty good. So I think you probably want to put the -X/, like the Toxic Deluge type of board wipes in here, where you can control the amount of minus you're giving, and you can also control your commander's power. So now I can sack my tokens, make my Nemata really big, Toxic Deluge or Mutilate or something like that, and my commander survives, and then also all the creatures I just killed, I replenish my sapperling stock, right? Because obviously this is if a creature an opponent controls would die. So if I kill 7 creatures, I get 7 sapperlings. And then also 1 and a black, sacrifice 2 sapperlings, draw a card. So great. Sapperling Tribal, obviously. I mean, Slimefoot goes in this deck for sure, and this goes in a Slimefoot deck. So if you have a Slimefoot deck, Nemata is a phenomenal fit there. They go in each other's decks for sure. Anything you're doing in a slime, could you just swap out Slimefoot for this guy if you have a Slimefoot deck? Probably, right? You could probably just swap them out. I mean, they're not doing the exact same thing, but very similar. They almost certainly go in each other's decks. All the sapperling stuff, again, if you're going to make a Nemata deck, just go look up Slimefoot decks and all the usual suspects in there you could throw in here as well. I will say, though, for the 100th time, Nadir goes in this deck as well. All right, again, we have the tokens. Now, of course, Nadir is making elf tokens, but whatever. I mean, your tokens you're sacrificing, and every time you do, your Nadir gets better. So I think he goes in this deck. Nadir's Nightblade again, because you're sacrificing the tokens. So you want to look into that. Agent of the Iron Throne, a card that I've already thrown in like 5 or 6 decks, you know, on my channel or patrons decks. Again, is going to fit this theme as well. So that's the other the aristocrats type of stuff, the blood artist, the Zulaport cutthroat type of stuff. Also is going to fit here because you're sacrificing your own creatures, obviously, right? I would also probably do like a Dark Prophecy, because every time I sacrifice my sapperlings, I draw a card. I would also do, again, there's a ton of support here. Moldervine Reclamation, obviously, perfect fit here. You could do Species Specialist, naming sapperling, again, because that doesn't care about tokens. So every time I sack those tokens, I get to draw. Tons of support here. Tons and tons and tons. This is going to be a popular one for sure, just like Slimefoot was. All right, getting to the commanders that maybe are not necessarily a reprint. So Soul of Windgrace. So we have Lord Windgrace, which was a planeswalker. Now we have a creature. So this is Soul of Windgrace, and it's a cat avatar. So that makes me think that it is the same Windgrace, right? Yeah, it probably is, right? So 1 black, red, and a green. Cat Avatar 5/4. When Soul of Windgrace enters the battlefield or attacks, you may put a land card from a graveyard on the battlefield tapped into your control. Yeah, it definitely is the same guy. So I guess he must have died, and now he's coming back as a avatar or something. So we're in a lands theme. Shocking. So what else do we got here? Pay a green and discard a land card. You gain 3 life. Pretty fantastic. Pretty fantastic. So now we have a discard land. I mean, they're all discard lands here, aren't they? 1 and a red, discard a land card, draw a card. Oh boy. 2 and a black, discard a land card. Soul of Windgrace gains indestructible until end of turn. Tap it. Oh man. Is this better than Lord Windgrace for a lands deck? I think it might be. I think it might be. Because of those last 2 abilities, right? You have a protection on your commander, which is, I say it all the time, is fantastic. It is going to be tough. Like, it would be really, really difficult if you're playing this deck to not leave that mana open, right? Because someone casts a board wipe and you don't have the 2 and a black, and you're like, oh, that's a feel bad moment. So it's really going to be important to leave the 2 and a black up to protect against that. But that 3 mana is kind of a lot to leave up all the time. Discard a land card, draw a card. Oof, oh boy. You know, like Gitrog, obviously. I mean, Gitrog's going to go in any Windgrace deck already. But with Gitrog, this is now 1 and a red, discard a land card, draw 2 cards. Oh boy, you can really go off there, right? And yeah, a lot you can do there. Again, there's not much to talk about here. Can you just swap it out? Can you swap out your Lord Windgrace deck for this guy? I think you could. Is it better? I mean, when it enters the battlefield or attacks, put a land card from your graveyard onto the battlefield. I think it is. I think this is better. It's a lot faster. You can do a lot, like with Windgrace, with Lord Windgrace. I have to, obviously now we have to define which is which. With Lord Windgrace, it's a planeswalker, so you play it, you're only going to plus it or minus it. You're getting limited amount of use out of it, where with this guy, you can just go nuts, right? On turn 8, with a Lord Windgrace, I can just plus it and that's it. Here, I can go attack, put something in, land into play tapped, then I can discard a bunch of stuff. Like, you can just go nuts and you can do a lot more in a turn with this guy than you can with Lord Windgrace, I think. I think this is better, and I think a lot of people are going to swap out their Lord Windgrace for this. This is what happened with Omnath, right? Omnath was the go-to lands commander, by far the most popular one of the most popular commanders in the entire format, Locus of Rage. And then Lord Windgrace came out, and everyone's just like, oh, well, I'm just going to take my Omnath deck and add black to it and oust the Omnath, and Omnath disappeared. It's still a popular commander, but I never see it anymore. So, yeah, and this might be the case here, where Lord Windgrace takes a huge hit because of this card. A huge hit. I think it's straight up better. I mean, I think, you know, from my perspective, I would never play this commander. I don't think I would ever play a lands deck. But if I'm looking at this, I'm going, this is just more interesting. I can gain life even if I really need to, right? I mean, don't overlook that possibility. This is just a more interesting, interactive commander that is doing more than Lord Windgrace. So I'm just going to swap it out. I think it's a better lands commander in general. All right, moving on to the commanders that I am pretty sure are not a reprint. Astorbearer of Blades. I don't think there's an Astor. I maybe someone correct me if I'm wrong. I think this is the first time we've seen this guy. 2, a red and a white human warrior 4/4. When Astorbearer of Blades enters the battlefield, look at the top 7 cards of your library. You may reveal an equipment or vehicle card from among them and put it into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in random order. Equipment you control have equip 1. Vehicles you control have crew 1. Wow. I was going to say, here we go with another boring equipment vehicle commander in Boros. But obviously, again, this is sort of the similar situation where, is this now just better, right? If you're playing that Dapala deck, is this better? Are you just going to swap this guy out as your commander because now all your vehicles have crew 1? It depends what you're doing in the Dapala deck. If you're doing more of a dwarf tribal aspect there, obviously you wouldn't. If you're doing a straight up vehicles deck with your Dapala, this might just be a better option. Enters the battlefield, look at the top 7 cards of your library, an equipment or vehicle, and put it into your hand. That's great. I mean, you probably want to do both, I imagine. Like, this is just, what's the hammer? The Colossus hammer? Oh boy, right? So is this going to, like, how many commanders are going to be ousted again because of this guy? Probably a few, right? Probably a few people are like, I mean, this obviously goes in a lot of those decks. It's going to go in probably all of the, I mean, if you have a Depala deck, this goes in there. If you have almost every, I think probably Boros equipment commander is going to want this guy in the 99. But I mean, how many commanders get ousted by this guy, right? How many, I mean, again, vehicle commanders, maybe. Equipment commanders, probably a bunch of equipment commanders. People are just going to go, that's just a better fit. I think, I mean, I guess there's some equipment commanders that are going to let you equip for cheap and whatnot. But yeah, this guy is definitely going to oust a lot of commanders, I think. All right, and lastly today, another Boros commander, Tomi Devonte. Again, a name I don't recognize. I don't think this is a reimagining of a different commander. It'd be interesting if it was, because I can't think the name doesn't ring a bell. Fury Rider, 1 red, red, white. Human Knight, 3/3 with Vigilance and Trample. Okay. And I can already feel what this card's going to be doing. Whenever Tomi Devonte, Fury Rider, attacks, all other attacking creatures you control get +1/+1 until end of turn. Other red attacking creatures you control gain trample until end of turn. Untap each other white attacking creature you control. That was doing exactly what I expected until the end there. So that makes it a little more. I'm glad they threw that in there because that makes it a little more interesting. So we're in a sort of that very stereotypical Boros attacking theme. Our commander's got vigilance and trample. We can throw equipment on it, so you can do equipment things. When it attacks, all other attacking creatures you control get +1/+1. You know, I mean, that's sort of a shrug moment there. It's been done to death. Even in mono white, it's been done to death. Just giving your creatures +1/+1. Anthem effects. You know, attacking creatures you control getting an anthem. All that is kind of like eh. But the interesting part that you could actually maybe do something interesting with is at the end here, right? So red attacking creatures you control gain trample. Okay. Again, like the thing here is you're probably in a go wide strategy, right? You want all your attacking creatures to get +1/+1. Just having one big creature. So now if I have a big creature, let's say I have a big red creature that I want to give trample to, you could do that, right? So I have to attack with my commander. So, you know, this makes things a little difficult. You have a commander that's not very big. Vigilance and trample, so what? Your opponent can just chump with a 4/4 and you're dead, right? So you have to play around a little bit, right? You're going to have to protect it. There are obviously lots of ways to do that. I mean, there's a few for sure that I can think of off the top of my head. So that's going to be important. I mean, even just I give my commander flying, like Power Matrix. I'd love a Power Matrix in this deck. That's why I like that card so much, because it gives all those different abilities. Tap, give my commander flying is the important part here. So it's flying, first strike, trample, +1/+1, right? The flying is the big one because now I'm giving my commander evasion. That's why I like that card so much. And I'm going to be getting in for damage, which is good too, but mostly I want to get that attack trigger. And when you want attack triggers on your commander, making it so that it's not going to be chumped or just blocked all the time is important. So I attack with a big red creature that I want to give trample to. It is a very convoluted way to give trample to your creatures. There's easier ways to do it. Power Matrix, as I just talked about, is a much easier way to give trample to your big red creature that you want to give trample to. So, And if I'm in a go wide strategy, which is probably more likely here, I have a bunch of 1/1s or 2/2s. I give them +1/+1 and trample. Like trample's not really very useful unless it's on a bigger creature. Also, which is kind of weird about your commander as well. All other attacking creatures you control get +1/+1, so she doesn't even give +1/+1 to herself. I like the vigilance. The trample's not great. I mean, you could go a Voltron strategy here, but then all of her other abilities are not really doing a whole lot. The more I talk about this commander, the less I like it, because there's so many things here that are not working together. Again, if I'm doing a go wide strategy, now the trample is like, who cares? Because I probably have a lot of little creatures rather than a lot of big creatures. Untap each other white attacking creature you control. That's the only one that I think is maybe a little interesting that you could do stuff with. I can't remember the Boros commander off the top of my head. It is transforming, or an MDFC commander. I can't remember the name, but it's Plarg on the front, the red guy. Then on the back, it's a white commander. Augusta, is that the name? That does a similar thing with tapping and untapping your creatures when you attack. How is that relevant here? I don't know. That's just what came to mind, where you could do a similar thing there. Not a very popular commander, so obviously a lot of people aren't using it, but you could do a lot of the similar strategies. The inspired mechanic is the only thing that comes to mind here. Whenever this creature becomes untapped, that kind of stuff. So I attack with the creature, and then I can untap it right away and get that inspired mechanic or that untapped mechanic. Also, it untaps your white creatures so that they are now able to block, which is important. There's not a lot. There's not a lot you can do here. There's a few things. It's a tough one. It's a tough one. Again, there's so much going on here that doesn't play into itself, where it's like, okay, you look at this commander and you're like, oh, you kind of want to play a Voltron strategy because it's got vigilance and trample and you want it to be attacking, but the Voltron strategy doesn't fit with anything else that it's doing. Go wide strategy, okay, but giving your red attacking creatures trample doesn't really. Obviously, the untap each white creature okay, I see what's going on here. What they're doing is they're giving vigilance to your white creatures and trample to your red creatures, which is what she has, vigilance and trample. She's giving trample to the red creatures, vigilance to the white creatures. However, giving vigilance to your attacking creatures does nothing because they're already tapped and attacking. Instead, they just worded it untap each white. So they're giving pseudo vigilance is what they're doing. So that's what you're doing here. Yeah. I mean, chalk this up to another Boros commander that nobody's going to play, I think. Yeah. I mean, it might fit nicely into the 99 of a few decks. This is going to be a very unpopular commander. It's going to be one of the most unpopular from this set. I'll just go out on a limb and say that right now. There's just too much going on here that doesn't fit with everything else. And just a whole lot of not a lot of interesting stuff where you're just sort of in that Boros attacky theme, right? Which they got away from for a long time, and now we're revisiting it. I mean, they can't all be winners, right? It's okay. They can't all be winners, and I'm sure someone in the comments is going to tell me they print these cards for standard too. That's fine. It's fine. They can't all be winners. No problem. Anyway, what do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below what you think of these new commanders. I'm sure there's going to be a few more videos coming out this week with these guys. They're going to be pouring all these legendary creatures on top of us, and I want to talk about them as they come out. But that is it for today, and thanks for tuning in.